up, YouTube? It's for Millsy, back with Hometown Commander. We're back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to out-brew your favorite Magic channel. We're in week 2 of Doctor Who content. We did the timey-wimey deck last week. We're on a Paradox Power this week. Today we're doing the Paradox Power Precon. And tomorrow we'll take a look at a commander from the deck that isn't the face commander. Again, the rules for this one being the kind of precon upgrade style episode is we're trying to keep as many cards from the Doctor Who deck and other decks as we can, but still upgrade it to make the deck better or to fit better the theme that we have. So, of course, Paradox Power is the deck that represents the 12th and 13th Doctors, so Capaldi and Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. And the 13th Doctor is the face commander of the deck, so of course we are sticking with her. Her ability is whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, we're going to +1/+1 counter on target creature. We're going to take advantage of that ability, at least we're going to try to. And then it has Team TARDIS. At the beginning of the end step, untap each creature you control with a counter on it. Well, the 13th Doctor is originally paired with Yasmin Khan, who's still in the deck, but I decided to switch over to Ryan Sinclair. I think he's going to better do what we need him to do, of course, or the deck to do. Of course, Ryan is, of course, a companion of the 13th Doctor, so it definitely still works out canon-wise. But it says, whenever he attacks, we exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card. We can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. If it's a spell with mana value less than or equal to Ryan's power, put anything not cast this way on the bottom in a random order. So the thought process here is, as we cast things not from our hand, using some other fun abilities and cards, we put counters on Ryan. Ryan can attack and then play things for free on attack once he attacks. That's at least my thought process, and that will actually get us more spells cast from exile to get us more counters on our creatures. And then remember, the 13th Doctor will untap everyone at the end step if they have a counter on it. So that's the idea. We're basically trying with the deck to cast spells from anywhere other than our hand, get counters on all of our creatures, and try to swing the board out that way. If we're playing lots of spells, or we can generate value otherwise, but again, the goal at the end of the day is go tall with those counters and hit into our opponents. For all the decks, I've tried to keep the mana base pretty standard to what it was out of the deck. The only real things I believe I added was the Ketria Triumph. I believe the rest of the I don't believe there was all of the check lands. 1, 2. Yeah, the other 2 check lands, we got the Rootbound Crag, but we didn't get the other 2 check lands. I figured we're playing enough basics and enough other things, it's probably worth it. We got the Cinderella in the deck. Again, the thing I love about all these precons is we're getting the Innistrad lands reprinted, and I think that's really important. I also added the Spire Garden, the Training Center, and the Rockfell Vale was in the deck, so we just added the... the Rockfell was the Innistrad land. Oh, Rejuvenating Springs. We added the commander lands as well. Again, just trying to make our mana base more consistent. Again, but the deck reprinted a lot of cool things. The Innistrad lands, the Horizon lands. Again, great reprints to have. But again, we're just adding a few extra lands to make it better and hopefully get a little bit more consistency on getting all of our colors. When we get into the enchantments, we're going to start to see where we're trying to have some fun. First of all, for enchantments, all will be 1. This is, of course, the namesake of the Phyrexian Obi-Wan set. This is whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, it deals that much damage to target opponent, creature, and opponent controls, or planeswalker opponent controls. This is here to help us pay off every time we cast a spell from another than our hand, put a counter on a creature with 13th Doctor, and then deal a little bit of damage. Whether it's hitting a creature or an opponent or one of their planeswalkers, we're just going to try to dish out that damage. I have no way to go infinite with Obi-Wan. I'm just trying to dish out the damage with it. Arcane Bombardment, one of my pet cards, and a card I think fits great here. Again, 13th Doctor wants us to cast spells from anywhere other than our hand. Arcane Bombardment feels perfect. We can cast all of the ones underneath it every turn when we cast our first instant or sorcery by fetching one back out of our graveyard and adding it to the stack. Again, that's multiple casts per turn that are from anywhere other than our hand. This will affect some of our other abilities, but if you wanted to dive even deeper into this, we could add, the cards like Shark Typhoon and things like that to, make extra tokens along the way. But again, I think Bombardment feels really good because it does exactly what we're trying to do. Bigger on the inside from the deck, we enchant an artifact or land, and it has tap, target player adds 2 mana of any color. The next spell they cast this turn has Cascade. Again, the hope here is Cascade, when we cast that spell, we exile cards from the top until we reveal a non-land card with less CMC, and we can cast it for free. So again, there's another spell potentially we could cast from anywhere other than our hand. Hardened Scales, just to double up on the number of get an extra one every time 13th Doctor is putting a counter on something. I feel like that could be important, especially in the long run if we can get enough counters on things. Heaven Sent, of course, the episode with Capaldi in it. On 1 and 2, we investigate, and on 3, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. It says that then if one has 0 less life, we draw 7 cards. Otherwise, we exile it and we can cast it again. This will always put that into exile for us to cast again. But again, investigating is not bad because then we can draw cards. I think the one card that's going to help us really pay off paying things from anywhere other than our hand, and that's Passion Archaeologist, especially because of its ability. It says commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell from exile, it deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. Note that it says commander creatures, not commander creature, which means both Ryan and 13th Doctor will have this ability. Now, I'm pretty sure that means that if both of them are out, this will get doubled up. I have never tried this in a game before, but that's my guess. If it's not right, I apologize that ruling isn't right, but my understanding would mean that they both then have this ability, and that would mean that anytime we cast a spell from exile, if we control both of them, it should double up on damage. We'd be able to get hit, 2 different opponents, wherever it may be. Again, if that's the case, great. If it's only one of them, it's still good because we're still spreading damage. Return the Past, as long as it's your turn, each instant and sorcery in your graveyard has flashback. Flashback's equal with mana cost, so we can just play a spell back out of our graveyard. What I like about this is, 1, it's not from our hand, so it's going to do all the triggers, and it will still trigger some of the other abilities we have. Of course, won't trigger the Archaeologist because it's from our graveyard, but again, this will be helpful because we can get things back out of our graveyard if we need them. If we don't see the bombardment, we can still cast those things back out of our graveyard and still use those spells again. Rhythm of the Wild to give all of our creatures a pulse and pulse encounter or haste when they come in. It stops our creature spells from being countered. And this is just here for a couple of the creatures as we get up top that we can use their abilities the turn they come in. And then we're bringing in a 40k card in the Lost in the Dam. It says whenever a land enters the battlefield under control from anywhere other than our hand, or we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, we make a little token. Again, the hope here is just, as we're casting things in exile, we can go wide on tokens and either help keep us alive or potentially help beat our opponents down if need be. Getting into the artifacts, we're playing pretty similar to what we did in timey-wimey as far as some of the artifacts. It's just changed up a little, playing the Arcane Signet. I know the Laser Screwdriver is a master thing, but I feel like it still fits the deck really well. It's a 3-mana rock that taps for anything. The 1 on this one is tap a creature, whereas the Sonic Screwdriver is untap. The 2 is surveil one, whereas the Sonic Screwdriver is scry one, and then the 3 is go to creature, whereas the Sonic Screwdriver is making creature unblocked. I still like both of these. I think they're both useful, and I think it's worth playing both. Psychic Paper, I think, can help us get a creature through, because it says that whenever it's attached to a creature, choose a creature name and a creature type. It has ward 1 can't be blocked. It has that name, it has that type. I mean, we can really say anything random. The point is that that creature can't be blocked. We're going to put this in the thing that if it's on Ryan, if we're putting all the counters on Ryan, which could potentially count for commander damage, we could do that. We could put it on something else, but again, get something in unblocked. Curse Mirror just seems interesting. It comes in as a mana rock, but the turn it comes in, we can have it copy any creature on the battlefield. So it has haste. This could be good for a couple of the creatures we'll talk about up top. Getting extra copies of their effects for only 3 mana could be pretty darn good. River Song's Diary, I feel like, feels a little bit better here. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery from their hand, we put it underneath this instead of... we exile it instead of putting it into the graveyard. In the beginning of our upkeep, if there are 4 more cards exiled, that we can play one of them at random. If we do, we cast it without paying its mana cost. I like this spell, this a lot, because we can just start getting things underneath it and then casting those things from exile and getting use of all of our effects that do that. We're playing the Soul Ring, of course. We're trying out Sword of Forge and Frontier. This was the last of the sword cycle from Phyrexian LB1. But I feel like it's going to end up being really useful. Pro red and green is a good combination. A lot of creature decks really care about that, so this could help us get in for good attacks. It says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we exile the top 2 cards of our library. We can play those cards this turn, and then we can play additional lands. We could potentially hit more land drops, play some spells from exile, and get all of our abilities. And again, the sword cycle is very good for doing those kind of things. And I like Forge of Frontier, especially where we're trying to play things not from our hand anyway. The TARDIS, of course, giving something Cascade is going to help a ton in, cascading into another spell and playing something from exile. All three of our talismans, we have the Talisman of Creativity, the Curiosity, which has Jody's glasses, and then the Talisman of Impulse, having the 12th Doctor's guitar, which I absolutely love. And then the Ozolith. I mean, if we're going to be throwing a bunch of +1/+1 counters around, at the end of the day, the Ozolith does really good at kind of collecting those counters when those creatures get destroyed or exiled or whatever it may be, and putting them back onto new creatures. I feel like this could be very good. We can give things trample, if we can get things unblockable, put those counters on them, and hit in for massive damage. Getting into our instance, we have a couple pieces of removal. Beast Within can hit any permanent and give its controller 3/3. Chaos Sport puts something back in their library. They shuffle and reveal the top, but if it's a non-land, if it's permanent, it goes onto the battlefield. Delayed Blast Fireball should act as a removal for us because it would deal 2 to each opponent and each creature they control if we cast from our hand, but if we cast it from anywhere, if we cast from exile, it's 5 to each, which is going to be pretty helpful. We can get this under our bombardment. If we cascade into this, we get that ability. I feel like it's just going to end up being really good to get into our opponents, deal a bunch of damage. Flatline, I like. If we're in a deck where we're attacking, I feel like this card's important. Make all of our opponent's creatures into an 0/1. The other thing I really like about Flatline as an idea is if you have an opponent that's swinging in for a massive attack that might potentially end the game that you can't stop, you could Flatline and try to stop some of the damage. Now, it does say base power and toughness 0/1, so like if someone has a Voltron commander that's got a bunch of equipment attached to it, it's not like you can bring them down to an 0/1. But if someone's blocking, attacking with a bunch of tokens that aren't being buffed at all, well, here you go. You could potentially stop some of that damage. Grow Spire for a little bit of ramp. Draw a card, put a land on the battlefield. Pretty classic little blue-green ramp spell and one of my favorites. I just think it does well here in helping us get more lands down. Leap, giving a creature flying until end of turn and drawing a card. Again, if we're pumping Ryan up or we're pumping another creature up with all these +1/+1 counters, giving it flying could help it get in for that extra damage and get us a good attack into our opponent. Reality Shift, exiling a creature and making their opponent manifest top card library. Again, the point is we're exiling the creature, hopefully getting it out of the way. And then a card I think would be fun to try out is Run for Your Life. Of course, Eccleston and Rose in the art. 1 or 2 target creatures, you each gain haste until end of turn. They can't be blocked except by creatures with haste, and we can escape it back to play it again. What I find interesting about this is we could pick the right creatures or creatures that just came in, maybe off Cascade or something like that, give them haste and get their abilities in. Kind of the creatures we really want with this are something like a Tali, which we'll talk about when we get up top, that has a really cool attack trigger. But again, Run for Your Life could be good because it could effectively make something unblockable. If your opponents don't have any creatures with haste, this is effectively going to make 1 or 2 creatures unblockable and could be just as good as a Leap or that Psychic Paper and getting either Ryan or another creature in for free to hit for good damage. Getting into the sorceries, we're trying to play a good mix of ramp and then other fun spells. We're in a deck that cares about playing things from exile. I thought, why not add a extra turn spell that could help us get us into another turn, into another combat, potentially help win the game. And of course, Auron's Epiphany we can foretell, so for 2 mana we exile it from our hand face down, and then on a future turn we only pay 6 and get extra turn and a couple bird tokens, but again it would count as playing something from exile. Cultivate came in the deck and it's great getting us those extra mana. One of my favorite cards from these decks, because I think it's just a really fun card, and I think it'd be absolutely bonkers if we can get it underneath a bombardment, is Ensnared by the Mara. So this is 4 mana, and it says each opponent picks a villainous choice. So each opponent has to choose separately what they want to do. Either they exile cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. We can cast that card without paying its mana cost if we want to. We don't have to. Or they exile the top 4 cards of the library, and this deals damage to them equal to the total mana value of those cards. I like this because this gives our opponents a choice. Do they want to give us the first thing that we get off the deck, which some decks may not want to do that, right? They could have some pretty big spells they don't want to hand to us. Or do they take the chance on the top 4? If we're playing against a really big creature deck, that could be a lot of mana value permanents. Again, the point is here, we have the potential to hit 3 cards from exile for our ability, which is absolutely great. Worst case scenario, everybody mills 4 into exile and deals some damage to them, and those cards are gone. So again, I think the upside is there, the downside's there as well, but I like it. This is the kind of card I like, and again, if we can get this under something, or we're playing this consistently, getting back to our hand or getting into that bombardment, we're playing it every turn, this can do a lot of damage. Escape to the Wilds. Exile the top 5 cards. We can play cards exiled this way until the end of our next turn, and then we can play an additional land this turn. So again, potentially might be a way to get an extra land off of it. But again, play some cards in exile, get the abilities, and keep the train going. I like it. There's probably better cards that do this type of effect, but again, we're in the right colors for it, and I like it. Expressive Iteration. We look at the top 3, 1 goes into our hand, 1 goes on the bottom, and 1 goes into exile, and we can play the exile card this turn. Again, if we exile a spell of this, that can factor into the 13th Doctor's ability and all that, and getting us the extra value, or this could find us a land. My advice on Expressive Iteration always is, if you're going to play the iteration, don't play a land drop before you play it, because there could be a scenario where you see all 3 lands and you have to play a land off of it, and if you already played your land drop, then that land is gone. So it's always good to think ahead when you're playing spells like this where you can actually play a land off of it. Farseek for some ramp. Impending Flux says whenever it deals X damage to each opponent and each creature they control, where X is 1 plus the number of spells you've cast from anywhere other than your hand this turn, and we can foretell it. Again, paying 2 and paying that cost later. This feels great, again, underneath a bombardment. This feels great after we've cascaded a big spell out and got some things for free off of it. Again, this could be really good depending on how many other spells we've played. On a good turn, this deals a lot of damage to our opponent, and on a mediocre turn, it just takes out all the low creatures on the ground. Into the Time Vortex seems really fun. 5 mana Cascade spell that doesn't do anything but Cascade, but it also has Rebound, so at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can pay it from exile without paying its mana cost, so that will trigger 13th Doctor's ability again. And again, 5 mana Cascade into something else, play that triggers as well. I like it. Again, this is the kind of card that I think fits into exactly what we're trying to do. Arenicus' Vow Duplication. There's a couple ways we can look at this. We can copy the 13th Doctor if we want to. We can copy Orion if we want to. There's a couple of creatures in our deck that we really care about. The point is they become non-legendary, which is and it has flying, which is important, because then we can have more than one of a legendary creature, or that creature can then get in easier to hit our opponents. Jessica's Will, classic commander card in its own right. We can either add a red mana equal to each card in target opponent's hand, and or exile the top 3 and play them this turn. If we control our commander, we can do both. Again, here we go, getting cards into exile, being able to play them if we have lots of mana, even using the mana we have from Jessica's Will, if we have either of our commanders out, because it's not just the 13th Doctor. Ryan will count for that ability as well. Last Night Together seems like an interesting card, especially as we're getting our commanders and other creatures bigger with Pulse and counters. Last Night Together could help us close out a game. It says choose 2 target creatures, untap them, put 2 counters on each of them. They gain Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase. Only the chosen creatures can attack during that combat phase. Again, I like this interesting card. Make the creatures potentially, hit pretty hard. Vigilance, Indestructible, so, could make some bad jump blocking situations for our opponents. Haste, meaning that if they came in this turn, they could still attack. And again, they're the only ones that can attack during that extra combat phase, but the cool part is we untap them, so we could go into our first combat, attack, main 2, play this, get an extra combat, and depending on the right things, like Atali or the things that have great attack triggers, this is extra spells we could cast in that turn. Nature's Lore for a little bit of ramp. Ponder and Preordain both come in this deck, and both of them are great cards for drawing. We want to take all the draw we can get, especially when we're trying to get into the pieces we really want. And I love that both of these, one, got reprints, because they're not cheap cards in their own right. Money-wise, mana-wise, they're both 1 mana. But 2, they actually both come in this precon, so that's great. Quantum Misalignment also comes in the deck, and this is kind of an interesting card. It says, create token, the copy of target creature you control, except it isn't legendary, and then same thing with Rebound. We get to do it again the next turn. Normally we expect this effect at 3 mana, like with Irenicus's Vow Duplication. What I like here is we pay the extra to get the rebound. We could pick the 13th Doctor, we could pick Ryan, we could pick a lot of other things. Again, we have lots of choices we'll talk about when we get up to creatures. But again, I like it. 5 mana, get the copy. The next turn we get another copy. I think more often than not, I'm probably going to choose 13th Doctor to get the extra counters. But depending on what the game is, maybe you pick something else and go with it. Rampant Growth for a little bit more of that ramp. Slip Through Space to make creature unblockable this turn and draw a card. Again, I can really see a scenario where you have a massive creature with all those counters, and you just need something to help you get in for damage, and this could do it. This could help us with get someone with commander damage if Ryan gets big enough with counters, or the 13th Doctor gets big enough with counters. Again, we cannot discount that it could happen. We could swing it into somebody and knock somebody out with commander damage. So keep that in the back of your head, and that's why we're playing things like Slip Through Space and Leap, just to help with that. 3 Visits got a reprint in the deck, and I'm really happy because it was getting up there in price, and it's a great one. This and Nature's Lore and Farseek can all go get our Triome, and that's the reason we added it, was because we can go get this. The only thing we had to be careful with for Nature's Lore and 3 Visits specifically is it talks about getting a forest card. So that's why I was glad that Cinderglade got the reprint, because that is a dual type land that we can go get. And we got the Sheltered Thicket, which is also a dual type land that we can go get. Otherwise, we'll just end up going to get a basic with those guys. But that's why we added the Triome, was because now we have 3 different spells that can go get the Triome. And then Twice Upon a Time says we can, for 2 and a blue, we can search our library for a Doctor and add it to our hand, and then shuffle. And it says cast if you only control 2 or more Doctors, take an extra turn and exile it. We are, I think, only playing 1 extra Doctor, but again, if you wanted to make this more common, you could add an extra one. The point here is, well, one of our Doctors is always in the command zone, so we know we're going to have it. It's just about finding the other one, which the other side of the adventure side of the spell does. And the cool part about the adventure spells is when we cast the adventure side, we exile that spell, and then we cast the other side from exile, so it's going to count for our abilities. Well, let's finish up our deck talking about the creatures, and I think the creatures is where we get a lot of added fun. Balmor just seems like a right card for this deck. We have a bunch of creatures that are going to be getting +1/+1 counters. We need to give them trample, and Balmor seems like a great way to do it, because every time we cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures we control get +1/+1 trample until end of turn. Again, now all of our creatures that are getting all these +1/+1 counters are going to have trample. It's going to allow them to hit harder, and Balmor is not a slouch in itself if we want to put counters on it since it's in the air. Clara Oswald just feels right. We have a Doctor whose ability we care about. It makes sense to play Clara, doubling up on all of her triggers and putting a counter on it every time we cast spells from anywhere in their hand. So I like it. It makes a ton of sense. Danny Pink, creatures you control have, whenever one or more counters are put on this creature for the first time each turn, draw a card, and has Mentor. So the cool part about Danny Pink here is every time we put a counter on a creature with 13 Doctor, if it's the first time we put it on that creature this turn, we draw a card. And this is great because it's just going to refill our hand, get us more cards to be able to play. One of the cards I definitely want to try to copy with any of these spells or get attacking is Atali Primal Storm. It says whenever it attacks, we exile the top card of each player's library. We can cast any number of them without paying their mana cost. This is a great ability because, one, it'll get something off top of our deck, but it could potentially hit for, 1 spell. It could hit for 4. Who knows? But I think this is going to come in handy and get us more triggers for 13th Doctor. And this is on attack, so we could potentially get something really good off of it before we even get into damage. So this feels like the kind of ability maybe we want to copy, or a creature we want to copy to take multiple attacks. Faldhorn, the commander of the Precon from Baldur's Gate, feels like a good idea. Whenever we cast a spell from exile or a land comes in from exile and we make a wolf, and we can discard a card to exile the top card and play it this turn. Again, this just feels right, paying us off for playing the cards from exile anyway, and it could potentially give us some blockers to help protect us as we set up our game plan. Flaming Tyrannosaurus from Capaldi's episode. I love this card. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it deals 3 damage to any target. That damage could stack up fast, depending on how quick we can get it out. Then you put a counter on it, and when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. That's each opponent, not to any target. That's each opponent. So if this thing gets killed or destroyed in any way, it could potentially hit our opponents for some big damage. Rock's Empress of Mars has Battle Cry and Trample, and then whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, we get a token. Again, the point is build up that board so we can at least block, or Balmor, right, could go wide and help us out in that scenario. Nardole, Resourceful Cyborg. Add a blue for each counter on it, spend it to only cast non-creature spells. Well, if we put counters on it with 13th Doctor, we could get some extra mana from it. And then it has Undying, so if it dies and had no counters on it, we can bring it back. Again, the point is, use the 13th Doctor, put some counters on it, and maybe it'll add for some extra mana for us. Plargan Nasaria from Aftermath was a card I thought about immediately, because I thought it was one of these ones where we get to play cards off the top of people's libraries. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent exiles from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. An opponent chooses one of them. You may cast up to 2 spells among the other cards exiled this way without paying the mana cost. Note, the cards don't go back. Everybody just exiles till we hit something. So this could help us, get rid of things for our opponents. But again, someone picks one that we don't cast, we choose between the other 3 and pick 2, and again, we get the triggers. I like the card. It's 5/4 body, so it's not bad in its own, and it kind of just does what we want it to do. Sisterhood of Karn is one of the big reasons we want to make a creature unblockable. It enters the battlefield with a counter on it, and whenever we cast a spell from our hand, we double the amount of counters on it. So the cool part about this trigger is if we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand and we have the 13th Doctor and the Sisterhood of Karn out, we can put the counter on first with the Doctor and then double the counters. But again, Karn's a great target for trample, a great target for slip through space or leap. Again, this is going to get big really quickly, and then we swing in for that damage. Stormkilled Artist gets +1/+0 for each artifact we control, but it says whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, we create a treasure. That's going to help us fund more spells, and again, it could just get bigger depending on how many treasure we have. And again, we're going to be casting a lot of instant or sorceries either from our own or maybe off our opponent's decks. So I like this because it's just going to help fund us that mana. Reality Chip. We can look at the top card of our library at any time, and if it's attached to a creature, we can play lands and cast spells from the top, which is anywhere other than our hand, so it's going to trigger our commander. So I like it. It makes sense. It comes down immediately. We can look at the top. We know it's coming up. And then we can play lands from the top, which is equally as useful. Our other Doctor is the 12th Doctor. Whenever we cast the first spell anywhere other than our hand during each turn, it has Demonstrate, which means we can copy it. If we choose to copy it, another opponent that we choose may copy it as well. Whenever we copy a spell, we put a counter on it. And we do have some ways to copy spells in the deck. So, hey, could potentially put some counters on that way. But again, Demonstrate could be important. We obviously don't want to hand someone a Demonstrate spell that would be too good for them. But again, I think it would be useful in the right situations to demonstrate a spell if we need to. Veyron makes a ton of sense. It's not a cheap card, but I think it's going to help the deck out a ton. It says whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And then if casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control, it triggers an additional time. So as long as we cast an instant or sorcery, the 13th Doctor will go off twice. All these abilities will go off twice that go off on spellcast. And Veyron can get big, and with Balmor's ability, it could give it trample. And then Yasmin Khan, exile the top card of our library until your next end step. So if we do this on our turn, it's till the end of turn. But more often than not with Yasmin, we want to tap it at the end step of our opponent's turn before us so that we can have our whole turn to make that decision. And she, like I said, she is the original companion for the deck. But I think I like Ryan a little bit more for what we're trying to do. Let me know, what do you think of Paradox Power down in the comments? The deck looks really fun. I think it's a cool idea to take maybe some of these other spells from anywhere out of your hand type style decks that we've seen in the past and kind of combine it all together. I really thought about adding more trample enablers since we're probably going to be pushing more +1/+1 counters around. But again, that's why this is the version 1 of the deck. We're just trying to put ideas together, and maybe you find that a Garruk's Uprising or those style effects are more important for you, and I would say throw it in, get trampled more often. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will catch you guys next time.